Some are born to be heroes, strong, athletic, handsome, charming, natural leaders who seem to be good at everything, despite maybe not being overly blessed with intelligence. The kind of man that as a boy ate 2 dozen eggs every morning to help him get large. The mythical Giga Chad that men want to be and women want to be with. While some men can be vain and shallow, others are true heroes that lead others into battle with no regard for their own safety, challenging the greatest of foes without fear or hesitation. This is one such hero. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a heroic episode of
The Dungeon Crashers.
I'm Guy.
And I'm Sapil. Before we get started, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our exciting D&D content. Today we are building the 6th Dragonlance hero and the 2nd of the 3 knightly orders, the Knight of the Crown. The Knights of the Crown are the largest order in the Knights of Somalia, and some think the least important, but that is not correct. The Knights of the Crown carry the weight of the order, while the Knights of the Sword quest about, and the Knights of the Rose discuss honor and chivalry. It is the Knights of the Crown that fight the wars and uphold the laws and the security of Solamnia. We are starting with the Knight of Solamnia background. It gives the skills Athletics and Survival, as well as 2 languages of your choice. A Knight of Solamnia can always receive modest food and lodging in any of the Knight's fortresses or encampments. They gain the Squire of Solamnia feat. This feat is found in the Shadows of the Dragon Queen, and it gives 2 abilities. The first is Mount Up, allowing him to mount or dismount with only 5 feet of movement, and the second is Precise Strike. Once per turn when he makes a weapon attack, he can give that attack advantage, and if it hits, he deals an additional 1d8 damage. He can do this a number of times per day equal to his proficiency modifier, but a use is only expended when the attack hits. Our hero is human, as are most Knights of Solamnia, and we are using the variant human. Instead of racial abilities, they get a skill proficiency and a feat of our choice. For the skill, we choose History, and for the feat, we went with the Slasher feat. It gives +1 to either Strength or Dexterity. When he critically hits an opponent with a slashing weapon, the target has disadvantage on their attacks until the start of the next turn. And once per turn, when he hits the target with a slashing weapon, he can reduce the speed by 10 feet until the start of his next turn. This gives him a few different ways to help his allies in battle and keep opponents near him instead of chasing after his friends. Before we assign the ability scores, I want to talk a little bit about Paladins. To be a good Paladin, it requires Strength, especially when multiclassing, also Constitution and Charisma. Dexterity-based Paladins are possible, but we aren't doing that. That leaves Intelligence, Dexterity, and Wisdom that can be lower. For the most Paladins, Intelligence is a logical choice for the lowest stat. Paladins don't really need it, and it works for roleplay. One doesn't need to be smart to know right from wrong, and that's all a Paladin needs to know. However, this character is a student of history and the legends of the Order, so even if we can't afford a high score, we don't want a negative. Dexterity is next, the most likely choice for many Paladins. They get some benefit from it for dexterity saves and initiative, but we are going to be wearing heavy armor, so he won't be doing acrobatics or sneaking up on people. However, this character is supposed to be an elite physical specimen, so even though we don't have the points for a high dexterity, we also don't want a negative. If you rolled your scores and have a spare high number, that would be a good place to put it. If you can get a 14 or better, consider wearing half plate for better mobility. This leaves Wisdom. Usually dumping Wisdom is a bad idea, but Paladins are proficient with Wisdom saves and will eventually add their Charisma modifier to all saves so they can afford to do so. It also makes good roleplay sense. Charging your horse against a dragon or demon lord is an action that many would consider foolhardy. Wisdom is associated with faith in Dungeons & Dragons, but Knights of the Crown is motivated by more the devotion to the king and country than in faith to the gods. That being said, we put a 15 on Strength, making it 16 from the bonus point from the Slasher feat. We put a 13 on Constitution, making it 14 with the first racial bonus point. We put a 10 on both Dexterity and Intelligence, and we put an 8 on Wisdom, and lastly a 15 on Charisma, making it 16 with the second racial bonus point.
Our hero comes from a long line of Solamnic knights. His father and uncles are all knights, as is his older brother. From a young age, he trained at arms and learned the stories and history of the knights. As he got older, he grew tall, strong, and fit, and began sporting the bushy mustache that Knights of Solamnia are famed for, and much to his father's disapproval, he also grew a beard to match. This isn't forbidden, but is definitely uncommon, but he thought it gave him a rebellious appearance that the young ladies of the town swooned over. While some young sons were sent away to be squires in other households, he was trained at home by his father. His father, a distinguished Knight of the Rose, was a strict teacher but also a kind man and loving father. As a young man, he set out from home, taking only his arms, his warhorse, some spare clothes, and a pouch of gold, and set off to take service with the king. He begins play as a paladin. He gains 2 skills from their list, and he takes insight and persuasion. He has a strong personality and a natural charm, making him very good at convincing people to see things his way. He is proficient with all weapons, armor, and shields, as well as wisdom and charisma saves. He's armored in chainmail to start, but will want to upgrade to plate mail as soon as possible. He carries a shield, and his weapon of choice is a longsword, but he also carries a mace, as he has heard that there are some foes whose hides can't be cut by mortal weapons. Additionally, he carries a pair of hand axes and a dagger to throw at enemies that might be out of reach of his blade. Lastly, he carries a lance. He is a cavalryman, as are all the Knights of Solamnia, but in truth he prefers fighting on foot, though when mounted the lance is his preferred weapon. As a paladin, he has divine sense, letting him use an action to know the location and type of any fiend, celestial, or undead within 60 feet that is not behind total cover, as well as concentrated or desecrated places and items. He can do this a number of times per day, equal to his charisma modifier +1. He probably won't need this many. In practice, this ability rarely becomes useful, and is more for flavor, but it isn't useless. We've had it come into play in our campaign, and when it has, it's been very useful. He also gets Lay on Hands, which is a reserve of healing power equal to 5 times his paladin level. He can use an action to spend these points to heal himself or others a number of hit points equal to the points spent. He can also spend 5 of these points to cure a disease or poison affecting someone as part of the same action. This ability is excellent. The healing is nice, but the ability to cure poison at first level is very good. He arrives at a fortress of the knights and asks for lodging. His heraldry is well known and he's welcome, but not without some hazing. He was young and just barely out of his training, and the other young knights had an established hierarchy in place, and felt he, as the newcomer, should be at the bottom of it. He took it all as good fun, but had no intention of being subordinate to men scarcely more experienced than himself, so he returned their jests with his own, and was always ready to test himself against the others. It did not take long before he had proved himself as a fighter to be respected, and his jovial nature was such that the other knights didn't resent him for it. He also made an impression on the older knights, who saw his potential, and some even commented on how he resembled his father at the same age. He stayed at the fortress for some time, training and making friends, before setting off again. There were no wars at the moment, but he had heard there were rumors of bandits to the west, and he thought he could make a name for himself fighting them. At 2nd level, he became a 2nd level paladin. He gains a fighting style, and he chooses interception. When someone he can see hits a target within 5 feet of him other than himself, he can use his reaction to roll a d10 and add his proficiency modifier, reducing the damage from the attack by the total. He must be holding a weapon or shield to use this ability. He also gains spellcasting, getting 2 first-level spell slots, and can prepare a number of spells from the paladin list equal to his charisma modifier plus half his paladin level rounded down, so 4 for now. And he prepares Bless to bolster his allies, Divine Favor if he instead needs to strengthen himself, Compelled Duel to keep enemies close to him and hopefully away from his allies, and Cure Wounds to tend to those injured in battle. The first 3 of these require concentration, so he can only use 1 at a time. Also, instead of casting spells, he can spend his spell slots on Divine Smite. When he hits a target with a weapon attack, he can expend a spell slot, causing his attack to deal 1d8 extra radiant damage to the target, plus an additional d8 per level of the spell slot. He travels to the lands to the west, where he meets a band of warriors tasked with hunting the bandits. They recognize him as a Knight of Solamnia and welcome him gladly when he asks to join them. They spend several weeks hunting down the bandits' hideout, during which time he becomes great friends with the soldiers, and they quickly accepted him as their leader. They had some skirmishes with groups of bandits who were surprisingly well armed and mounted, but were unable to take any alive to be questioned. Unlike bandits that he had heard of, these men fought to the death, even if they were unable to escape. Eventually, they find the bandit camp, and away it had been right under their noses. It was a village at the center of the area where the raids were occurring, and had not reported any attacks against it. Our hero and his men approached the village, not suspecting any trouble, merely seeking to water their horses. But once inside the town, they noticed something amiss. Though they saw a few men about the town and some livestock, there were no women or children to be seen. Our hero told his men to water the horses while he went to see what was afoot. He had thought to enter what appeared to be an inn or public house, but before he had a chance, a hail of arrows came from surrounding buildings. His men took what shelter they could, but he didn't hesitate. He charged to the nearest building, calling his men to follow, and invoking the blessing of Paladin upon himself and the men closest to him. They quickly ascended to the upper story and made short work of the archers, but by the time they had done so, a group of armed bandits were surrounded the building, and were sending warriors in to fight them. He led his men against the invaders, who fell easily enough, but then he smelled smoke. The remaining bandits had set fire to the building and were surrounding it to keep them pinned in the fire. Before his men could panic, he rushed into the street and laid about him with his sword, striking down as many as he could before they could overwhelm him. Inspired by his courage, the men followed suit and overwhelmed the bandits despite being outnumbered. After searching the village, they found only loot taken by the bandits and the bodies of the villagers who were slain by the bandits that commandeered their homes. None of the bandits survived to be questioned, but among their belongings he found a strange clawed insignia that he recognized from books he had read of old wars. It was a symbol of Takesis, the Dragon Queen. He tended to the wounded among his men, and they set forth for a night's outpost to report their findings.
At 3rd level, he becomes a 3rd level paladin. He gains divine health, which grants him immunity to disease, and he swears a sacred oath. For a Knight of the Crown, it would make sense to be a Paladin of the Crown, but that really doesn't fit the type of character we want to make, and we recently did another Paladin of the Crown build, so instead we are taking Oath of Glory from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. These Paladins want to lead by example. They try to embody what it means to be a hero and to honor their gods and nation by seeking glory in battle and performing heroic deeds. They gain the use of Channel Divinity and 2 options to use it. The first is Perilous Athlete. He can use it as a bonus action, and for 10 minutes he has advantage on athletics and acrobatics checks. The amount of weight he can drag, lift, or carry is doubled, and his long and high jump distance is increased by 10 feet. He also gains Inspiring Smite. After using a Divine Smite, he can channel Divinity as a bonus action and roll 2d8 plus his Paladin level and distribute that temporary hit points among any number of creatures within 30 feet. He also gains Oath spells, which are always prepared and don't count against the number of spells he can't prepare. The spells he gets are Heroism and Guiding Bolt. Guiding Bolt is particularly helpful as he is not a ranged fighter, and having a spell to blast enemies will be very handy. He also gains a 3rd 1st level spell slot. Out of recognition for his heroics, many knights offer to sponsor him to their orders, although none from the Knights of the Rose make such an offer. He thinks long and hard before he chooses a path. Should he become a wandering hero and join the Knights of the Sword, or devote himself to service and join the Knights of the Crown? While he sees himself as a hero, he enjoys the company of the other warriors and wants to be a leader of men, not a lone crusader, so he asks to join the Knight of the Crown, who gladly welcome him. At 4th level, he becomes a 4th level paladin, gaining an ability score improvement or a feat, and he's going to take the Knight of the Crown feat from the Shadows of the Dragon Queen. It allows him to increase his strength, constitution, or dexterity by 1, and he increases his constitution to 15. It also gives him Commanding Rally. As a bonus action, he can command an ally that is within 30 feet that can see or hear him, and they can immediately make 1 attack as a reaction, and if it hits, they add 1d8 to the damage. He can use this ability a number of times per long rest equal to his proficiency modifier. This ability is always good, but it's particularly useful if you have an ally that can make good use of it. A rogue can only make 1 sneak attack per turn, but they can make it on every turn, not just their own, if they have a way to attack on that turn, and this gives them 1. Other paladins or battlemaster fighters that can add additional effects like maneuvers or smites are also good choices. At 5th level, he becomes a 5th level paladin and gains extra attack. Now he can attack twice instead of once when he takes the attack action. He also gains a 4th 1st level spell slot and 2 2nd level spell slots and can prepare 2nd level spells. He can also prepare 1 additional spell. He chooses Lesser Restoration. He stops preparing Cure Wounds and prepares Prayer of Healing instead, and he also gains Enhanced Ability and Magic Weapon as Oath spells. At 6th level, he becomes a 6th level paladin and gains Aura of Protection. He and all his allies within 10 feet can add his Charisma modifier to any saving throw they make. He can prepare 1 more spell, and he takes Gentle Repose to help preserve his allies if they should fall until they can be taken to a priest to be restored. So let's take inventory on what he has to help his companions. He has Interception Style to protect them, the Slasher feat to slow enemies and possibly give them disadvantage, his Aura to boost their saving throws, Inspiring Smite to give them temporary hit points, Commanding Rally to give them an extra attack, spells like Bless and Heroism to bolster them, Lesser Restoration and Prayer of Healing to rescue them, and Guiding Bolt, which can give them advantage. Not bad, but he will also get more.
As he settles into his role as a leader of men, he finds himself quoting the wisdom from the histories of the Order and telling inspiring tales to motivate his troops, and he becomes very good at it and gets a reputation as a storyteller and a lore master. At 7th level, he becomes a first level bard. He gets one skill from their list and he chooses perception. He hasn't gotten it yet and will help with his poor wisdom. He also gets bardic inspiration, which are a pool of d6s equal to his charisma modifier. As a bonus action, he can say some inspiring words and give an ally one of these dice, and for the next 10 minutes the creature can use the dice and add it to an attack roll, saving throw, or ability check. The player can wait until after rolling the d20 to decide whether to use the dice, but must do so before the DM tells him whether it succeeds. A player can only have one inspiration dice at a time, and if they don't use it before the 10 minutes are up, it's lost. Bards also gain spellcasting. Since we are multiclassing spellcasters, his spell slots will be different than a single-class spellcaster and can be found on page 186 of the player's handbook. At this level, he doesn't gain any more spell slots, but he does learn 2 cantrips and 4 first-level spells from the bard list. Unlike paladins, bards have spells known, not spells prepared. A bard can use an instrument as an arcane focus for his spells, and our hero begins carrying a bugle. But as he is a sword and shield fighter, we're going to focus on spells that don't require somatic or material components when possible. He can use a divine focus on his sword or shield for his paladin spells, but not his bard spells. A Ruby of the War Mage is a common item that he could attach to his sword that would allow him to use it as a spell focus, and if something available in your campaign, I highly recommend it. But it isn't necessary. Bards have a good selection of verbal-only spells, and for the rest we'll take spells that are useful out of combat or that are range attacks that would be worth sheathing his sword for. For cantrips, he takes Vicious Mockery. It is verbal only, and despite only doing mediocre damage, it also gives the enemy disadvantage on their next attack, which is very useful. And we take Light. By this time our hero may have found a way to see in the dark, but since he doesn't have dark vision, Light is great to have. For spells, we take Dissonant Whispers and Command. Both are verbal only and very useful. Command can accomplish a variety of things depending on your creativity, but even obvious ones like Flee or Kneel can be powerful. Dissonant Whispers cause an enemy to use its reaction to move away, and it deals psychic damage. Depending on your DM, this could provoke an attack of opportunity as well. The game is a little ambiguous about this. It says voluntary movement, so a DM could say this isn't voluntary, but we don't see it that way. In our game, involuntary movement means being pushed or otherwise moved by something else. If a creature uses an action to move, it triggers attacks of opportunity and other things like Booming Blade, even if they were compelled to move. This makes more sense to us. We can see why being shoved would be different from running, but we don't see why running because you're charmed would be different or safer than running by choice. We also take Healing Word, which is verbal only as well, and a great way to keep allies in the fight without sacrificing an attack. Lastly, he takes Silvery Barbs, which is also verbal only, and a powerful defensive reaction that can protect his allies or himself. At 8th level, he becomes a 2nd level bard, gaining Jack of all trades, which lets him add half his proficiency bonus to any skill or ability check that doesn't already use his proficiency. This helps with our goal to make him good at everything, and it also includes initiative, which helps him a lot. He also gains Song of Rest. When taking a short rest, he can tell stories to help his allies rest. When anyone spends hit dice to regain hit points, they heal an extra d6. There's an optional ability from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything that we use in our campaign called Magical Inspiration. It lets a character with an inspiration dice from our hero to also add it to damage or healing from spells they cast. He also gains a 3rd 2nd level spell slot and 2 3rd level spell slots, although he doesn't have any 3rd level spells. These slots would be good for upcasting things like Guiding Bolt or Healing Word, and would be very good for smites. He does learn an additional 1st level spell from the Bard list, and he takes Comprehend Languages. At 9th level, he becomes a 3rd level bard, and he gains expertise in 2 skills, and he chooses Insight and Persuasion. Insight will make up for his poor wisdom and keep him from being easily deceived, and expertise in Persuasion will make him an even more effective leader. He also gains his Bardic College, and he joins the College of Valor. He would normally gain some weapon and armor proficiencies, but he already has them. But he also gets Combat Inspiration, which is the important part. People can now use inspiration dice from him on their weapon damage rolls, and they can use them as a reaction to increase their armor class against an attack. He gains another 3rd level spell slot and can learn another spell from the Bard list, and it can be 2nd level, and he chooses Blindness and Deafness. It is another verbal-only spell and is very useful. Blinding an enemy weakens them considerably, and it almost cripples spellcasters. At 10th level, he becomes a 4th level bard, gaining an ability score improvement or feat, and he increases his constitution to 16 and his charisma to 17. He gains a 4th level spell slot and can be used for upcasting or smiting, and he learns another bard spell that can be 2nd level, and he chooses Shatter. This will require him to sheath his sword and hold his bugle, but it's a useful area of effect damage spell for when he needs to hit a group of enemies. He also gains another cantrip, and he takes Prestidigitation. It has a lot of handy uses, including things like shining his armor, cleaning his hair and clothes, and other practical things. At 11th level, he becomes a 5th level bard. This is a tough call. Taking the 5th level bard is going to cost an ability boost, but he's going to be handing out inspiration dice like candy, and this level increases them to D8 and lets him regain them on a short rest, so it's worth the trade-off. Getting a 3rd level spell is an added bonus. He gains Font of Inspiration. That is what allows him to regain his inspiration dice on a short rest, and those dice become D8s. He gets another 4th level spell slot and can learn a spell that can be 3rd level. He chooses Motivational Speech. It is from the sourcebook Acquisitions Incorporated, but if you lack that material, it can be found online. It allows them to choose 5 creatures, and they gain 5 temporary hit points for an hour, and during this time they have advantage on wisdom saves, and if they are hit by an attack, they have advantage on the next attack they make. If they lose the temporary hit points granted by the spell ends early, although they still get the advantage on their next attack if that applies. His Vicious Mockery improves here, dealing 3d4 damage.
As the years have gone by, he has become respected leader among the armies of Solamnia, and his carefree ways and sense of humor haven't faded. He lives to prove himself in battle, and his men will follow him to the ends of the earth because they know that he would lay down his life for them at a moment's notice. When not in battle, he spends his time drinking and wenching in taverns, wrestling and engaging in other sports, along with other feats of strength, and telling tales of glory and valor. At 12th level, he becomes a 7th level paladin. From Oath of Glory, he gains Aura of Alacrity, which increases his movement and the movement of any allies within 10 feet by 10 feet per round. This will also apply to his mount, allowing him to race across the battlefield. At 13th level, he becomes an 8th level paladin, getting an ability score improvement or a feat, and he increases his charisma to 18 and his strength to 17. He gains a 5th level spell slot and can prepare one more paladin spell because he gained an even level, and one more because he increased his charisma. These spells can be 2nd level. At this point, choose whatever works best for you, because next level he is going to prepare 3rd level paladin spells, and we will want a few. At 14th level, he becomes a 9th level paladin. From Oath of Glory, he gains the spells Haste and Protection from Energy as Oath spells. Protection from Energy is a situational useful spell. Haste, on the other hand, is excellent. Although it is weaker in 5th edition than in previous editions, it is still strong for a martial character, and it suits this character's play style perfectly. He can also prepare 3rd level spells and should replace a few lower level spells. Crusader's Mantle is an excellent choice, allowing him to empower himself and his allies. He doesn't need to prepare Revivify as he has Gentle Riposte, and that will give him time to prepare Revivify later, but he might want to prepare it anyway so he won't need to rest to bring back a fallen comrade. Remove Curse is another spell that he doesn't need to keep prepared, but also might want to. Spirit Shroud is an alternate to Crusader's Mantle and lets him better empower himself at the expense of not aiding his comrades.
The bandits he fought long ago were a warning that he missed. He found more and more enemies bearing the seal of Takesis, and soon his people were in a full-blown war with the forces loyal to the Dragon Queen. The battles were intense, but he won victory after victory. His soldiers covered themselves in glory and waited eagerly for the next fight. He began hearing reports of a large gathering of the Dragon Queen's forces, and he received permission to take his forces to engage them. Along the way, he encountered another band of knights responding to the invasion. They were led by a Knight of the Rose whose exploits he had heard of. She also bore with her a legendary Dragonlance. With her rode a Knight of the Sword who had great renown, and his squire, a sturdy young knight whose enthusiasm made up for his inexperience. They banded together to continue their journey. Together they formed a significant army and were eager to meet the Dragon Queen's host. At 15th level, he becomes a 10th level paladin. He gains Aura of Courage, making himself and his allies within 10 feet immune to the frightened condition. He gains a 2nd 5th level spell slot, and can also prepare an additional paladin spell. At 16th level, he becomes an 11th level paladin. He gains Improved Divine Smite. Now all of his weapon attacks deal an additional D8 radiant damage. At 17th level, he becomes a 12th level paladin, getting an ability score improvement or feat, and he takes the Heavy Armor Master feat that increases his strength to 18 and reduces any bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage by 3 points. He also gains a 6th level spell slot and can prepare another paladin spell. At 18th level, he becomes a 13th level paladin. He can now prepare 4th level spells and should replace some of his lower level spells. Find Greater Steed and Banishment are good choices. From Oath of Glory, he gains freedom of movement and compulsion as oath spells. At 19th level, he becomes a 14th level Paladin, gaining Cleansing Touch. A number of times per day equal to his Charisma modifier, he can use his action to end a spell affecting himself or one willing creature. And at 20th level, he becomes a 15th level Paladin. From Oath of Glory, he gains Glorious Defense. As a reaction, when a creature within 10 feet is hit by an attack, he can use his reaction to give that creature a bonus to its armor class equal to his Charisma modifier. He can do this a number of times per day equal to his Charisma modifier. This character is a perfect leader. He makes his allies stronger just by his presence, and he has countless ways to empower them. And most of these don't stop him from being a devastating force in combat. He is tank, support character, and damage dealer all at the same time. He is also a fun sort of character play. He isn't the stereotypical stuffy paladin. He likes to carouse, laugh, brawl, and wench. He prefers the company of the common soldier over lords and princes. He is devoted to king and country, but even more so to the men under his command and his adventuring companions. He is absolutely fearless and laughs at danger. As a downside, multiclassing and the number of feats he's taken slowed his ability score at progression, and he is a little lacking. Never exceeding 16 constitution makes him a little light on hit points, and he doesn't reach 18 strength until higher levels. This shouldn't be too much of a problem, as he is good at protecting himself, and with smites he doesn't rely on strength for damage. We hope you enjoyed this character and our take on the new material from Shadows of the Dragon Queen. Please tell us about it in the comments, along with any questions, suggestions, or build ideas. And please join us next time when we finish off the Dragonlance series with the Knight of the Rose. Until then, cheers!